Okay, so today is going to be our introduction, and we're going to talk a lot about the different types of equipment so that we understand what it is we're talking about in the future. Is that cool? So again, my name is Mr. York. This is a cool picture that I took down in San Diego. Does anybody want to tell me what kind of picture this would be called? Is it a portrait? A landscape? There you go. That's what I call a landscape. What's our subject in this picture? Yeah. The whole thing, really, right? But yeah, your focus is kind of drawn to the tree. Some of you, your focus might be the sunset. But I mean, that's the idea of a landscape, is that there's not always one particular subject, unlike a portrait, where you're always focused on whatever the subject of your portrait is. You guys are here because of enrichment. You're here because you actually want to learn how to take better photos. So I'm going to talk a lot about all the different aspects of photography, and then what I'd like to do is get your hands on a camera as much as possible. And if you have one, please make sure you bring it with you so that you can take all of the lessons that I give you and relate it to something that you're familiar with. Now, every time that you guys come in here, I'm going to load you with a whole bunch of information, and then when you go home, you're going to have to take that information and try out the stuff I suggest to you guys by using your own equipment. Yes? Even if it's just your cell phone. Use the things that I give you and try to implement them as fast as possible so that you don't forget anything. And that's why you guys are taking notes as well. My rules for equipment are very simple. Always protect the equipment, be professional, and if it doesn't work the first time, please don't push or pull harder. That's how we break equipment. We don't ever want to do that. All right, so here's our first day. I want to give you guys a little introduction into photography, which means that we're going to be talking today about the different types of cameras and equipment. And I'm going to be using examples in front of me, as well as some examples online up on the projector. So I'm going to direct your attention in two different places. Is that cool? So first, I'd like you guys to take a look back here, and let's take a look at some different types of cameras, right? I usually would start with a cell phone. Can I use somebody's iPhone real quick? Because I know you all have iPhones. Can you just pass me your iPhone real quick? Thanks. I just need to make a phone call. No, I'm just kidding. Everybody, you guys are all familiar with your cell phones. When you have an Apple phone as opposed to an Android, it really does make a difference which way you hold your camera. You want your camera to be up on top, not on the bottom. Does everybody understand the difference? That's when you're filming video. When you're taking pictures, it really doesn't make that big of a difference because all of your stuff can be rotated easily. When we talk about aspect ratio, on video it makes a big difference, but in cameras it doesn't. It's not the same thing. Does everybody understand that? You can rotate a picture. You can't really rotate video. That's the biggest difference. What is the difference between this camera and, say, some of the other cameras that we talk about or that we have at home? Anybody know? The biggest thing is sensor size. Today we're going to talk about how big your sensor is. Now, your sensor can't be any bigger than this lens right here. So is that a very big sensor? Not really. In fact, I'll show you a comparison. You ready? Check this out. This is a different type of camera. This is a mirrorless camera. The nice part about this camera is that it allows me to see the sensor very easily. So I can take this off and I can see that's my sensor right there. Right? That's the computer sensor that actually detects light and what gives you your image. That is the biggest sensor that you get with this camera. Right? There's no different one. There's only one. That's it. Same thing with your cell phone. Which one's bigger? So this one's going to produce a much better quality image and with higher resolution and more detail. Now, you do have cell phones that have like 18 megapixels or more, and they produce some really cool images. But there are some limitations to your cell phone. Who let me borrow their cell phone? Was that? You can have this back. Thanks so much. So that's the first one, is the cell phone. And then what's the next type of camera after that? We don't see a whole lot of these. Check out this one. This is called a point and shoot. This one happens to be waterproof. What's the most popular waterproof camera right now? GoPro, right? Everybody loves GoPro. And they did a fantastic job marketing. They also they are really cool cameras. They're really great because the way that their lens is set up so that if you put it in front of you, it gets a super wide angle. So far we have really two different types of cameras we've talked about. One of the things that we're going to talk about this class is not so much which camera to purchase, but what's available, so that when you talk about equipment, you're able to actually distinguish one thing from another and decide what kind of camera you might like to purchase in the future if that's something that you're interested in, or if your parents are interested in. So our first thing we're talking about is equipment, and we said there are several different types of cameras. So we said the first one that we usually get is your cell phone. We talked about action cameras, which is like a GoPro. Number 3 is a point and shoot. After that, there is something called an in-between. And I'm gonna have to pull up a picture of that because I don't actually own one. And I'm gonna go to in-between cameras. And so, actually what's easier is I'm just gonna pull up, here's point and shoot, right? And that should give me some cool images. And some of these have really great zoom, but usually they go down flat. They have a fixed lens, not a removable lens. And then there's something like this. And sometimes these are known as point and shoot cameras, but this one's a little bit different. Ones like this, there we go, and this. These are kind of in between. These usually have a much larger zoom, but they still don't have a removable lens, which means that they're somewhat limited in what you can take a picture of and how you can use them. Does everybody understand? How many of you guys have a camera like this? Yeah, a couple of you guys do. And those are really cool cameras. Like I said, they often have really amazing zoom on them. So that's what we call an in-between, because it's in between a point and shoot and the next type of camera, which is mirrorless, which is the one that I just showed you guys. That's our Canon. We use these here at school. This is a Canon Eos M for mirrorless. We use these for video, but they do take still pictures as well. It has a removable lens, which means I can buy all kinds of different lenses for this. Pretty cool cameras. The biggest downside to these is the battery life is horrible on these. When we shoot video, we have to constantly replace the battery, and part of that is it's a cheaper camera. And finally, the last kind, which is DSLR, and that's this one. We have 4 of these. Your book has like, I don't know, 200? I don't know how many they've got. They have a lot of these. This is kind of a low-end one, but it does have a very nice lens on it, right? Our lenses we often call glass, and a lot of people say, you know what, just get a body and then buy nice glass. When I take off the lens, right, which you always want to be really careful about, and you look inside there, that's a mirror. That's actually not the sensor. That mirror flips up whenever you take a picture, and that's what makes that noise that you guys are used to hearing sounds kind of like this. Let me put it on manual. There we go. You hear that? Everybody hear that? That's the mirror flipping up to take a picture. Cool? It does stand for digital, you're right. Anybody know the rest of it? Oh, it's close. Here we go. Single lens reflex. And that's it. Those are really all the different types of photography cameras that we have. Obviously, there's video cameras that are a little bit different, ones that are specifically made for video. But because this is just a photography class and that's what we're focusing on, that's what we're going to focus on. Now, almost every camera up there will shoot still pictures and video, but video really is kind of a different class and a different focus, just slightly. Let's talk about pictures, shall we? Now, I don't want this to be like my vacation slides, but I did go through and I put together a whole bunch of different pictures for you guys to talk about different types of photography. Now, what type of photographer are you going to be? You don't have to decide today, but you should understand that, you know, different photographers focus on different types of photography. So, what is one type of photography that you may have heard of? Somebody mentioned landscapes before, right? So obviously there are people that they focus on landscapes. Even though many of us photographers will shoot different types of photography all the time. One day we might shoot this, next day we shoot this. There's usually one thing that we either are passionate about or that we really focus on. Some people might be landscape photographers. What's another kind that you can think of? Yeah. Portraiture, right? I'm a portraiture photographer for sure. That is my bread and butter. That's where I make most of my money. that is pretty much what I was always passionate about. I always just wanted to take really good portraits of people. Okay, so this week, you guys are going to think about a couple of things, like what kind of photography are you interested in? And I went ahead and I took a look and said, okay, what are the 30 different types of photographers out there? Well, there's a whole mess of them, and I don't ever want to show you anything inappropriate, even though the world of photography, if you start looking at it, at some point somebody will probably take a picture that is more like an artistic shot. And so just like with artwork, like if you go to a museum, do you guys often see pictures of statues with no clothes on? Yes? It's the same thing with photography. Because it is an art form, sometimes you might see something like that. Don't be afraid, I'm never going to show you guys something inappropriate in class. But I'm just pulling this up. It's something I can't avoid. When we're looking at different types of photographers, one of them does specialize on what they would call nudes, just like you would see in the art world or the sculpture world. But just a couple of different ones. Here's a fashion photographer and landscape photographer, wildlife photographer. Aerial photographer is interesting. I don't do a whole lot of that because I can't fly. But that would be kind of interesting if you were a kind of person that's in a helicopter. I have a friend that actually does aerial photography all the time because that's what he does for a living. He flies a helicopter. Sometimes he sends me footage, and I can show you some examples of that. Action sports photographer. I think that we all kind of do that during basketball season because we're all trying to take pictures of kids running very fast. Pet photographers, event photographers, real estate, architecture. Astrophotographer is kind of crazy. I don't do a whole lot of that. Photojournalist, concert photographer. I do a lot of that kind of stuff because I listen to live music a lot. So I really like taking pictures of that. Macro photographer. This is anybody that's basically going to take a picture of something that is normally really small but make it super big and show you lots of detail. And I'll show you some examples of that today. I've never heard of a medical photographer that I'm sure that they're there. Micro is like way below. School photographer, baby photographers, family photographer. That's a bunch of monkeys though. I don't know why they threw that in there. Satellite photographers. You can see there's so many different types of photographers, right? Landscapes, advertising photographer. Now this I am going to talk about today. If you guys are combining macro photography with somebody who wants to sell something, like on eBay, right? Or Amazon. If you guys ever post anything along, that's what we call product photography. And I'm going to show you guys a little bit about that today. Stock photographer, wedding photographer, equine, that's very specific. Paparazzi, right? The least favorite kind of photographer, the one that everyone hates. So all kinds of different photographers, and I'm going to show you guys some of my work, and I figured that was kind of a cool place to start. Does that sound good for you guys? You guys all right with that if I show you some of my pictures? So let's talk about landscapes first, and obviously the easiest landscape is to basically just go to Hawaii, right? This is a cell phone image. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? When you start stretching it out, you can see how it pixelates a little bit right there at the edges. Do you guys see that? I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll zoom in so you guys can see it. Right there against the mountains, you can start to see that it's not the clearest image, and that again has to do with sensor size. When you have a smaller sensor, it's hard to blow it up larger. Look pretty good though? One of the things I want you guys to look at always when you do a landscape in particular, or even if you have just somebody in front of a landscape, you want to make sure that it's level. Does everybody see this line right here? That is what we call our horizon line. Go ahead and write that down, horizon line. Everybody know how to spell horizon? H-O-R-I-Z-O-N, something like that? You're GATE students, you should be able to do it. Does it look straight to you guys? Yes or no? Yeah, pretty good, right? What about that one? Where's your horizon line? Way at the top. Is it straight? No. I don't even know the reason for that. In this case, I almost feel like I would just chop the horizon line off and crop it down here, like right there.